Rebel Devs Podcast, a show that challenges conventional thinking in the tech industry. Each episode features conversations with solutionists who have taken unconventional approaches to problem solving, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in their respective fields. Join the devolution.
Hey, Rebel Dev listeners, your host Tom May here on a happy Friday, as we're always out and about on Fridays, letting you listen in. We have another exciting podcast for us today and special guest as always. But before we get there, I love to introduce my partner in crime, Jonah May.
Not much. You know, the weather can't make up its mind here. We're getting dust storms. We're getting late spring temperatures. We're getting almost winter temperatures at night. It's weird.
That's Texas, hot, cold, and everything in between. Technically, in my world, I don't know when we're going to air this, but it's a wonderful Veeam dropped a security release on us, so everybody's scrambling to get that out in there. Jonah, how are you doing in that world today?
Well, we are actually we were already in the process of validating our Cloud Connect servers for 12.3 with our customer portal. So I think those upgrades were already set to start next week. So the thought is we're just going to roll to 12.3.1 as part of that, since it's supposed to be bug fixes only.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. Well, now we have our special guest with us, Will Baccich, and I'm going to have Will introduce himself. But before we do, Will and I worked together for, probably 10 years or something. I know.
Yeah, a little easy. Sure. I'm Will Baccich. I'm a partner at Seton Hill Partners. We provide fractional and interim CFO services. I work with clients primarily in the tech space, a number of SaaS startups, but also in IT consulting. And but our firm covers a wide swath of industry verticals, everything from real estate to construction to healthcare. Pretty much every space is covered by our team. We're 92 partners across the U.S. We have Texas roots. We started in Fort Worth. We have 27 partners here in the DFW and North Texas area now, and have been on a great growth curve. As this fractional leadership model seems to really make sense. It gives companies that, in my space particularly, like the fast growing SaaS businesses and whatnot, gives them the chance to have somebody that can bring in expertise and do things like help with pricing on a large opportunity, for example, or manage a capital raise, or structure debt correctly for the organization, and not necessarily devote all that time to one organization and spread myself across. I work with 4 different companies in this space right now, and have a good time doing that. Background wise, I've always been a technology guy. I had my first, I'll give away how old I am. I had my first job as a COBOL coder when I was 17 years old in 1976, and I got paid $2.35 an hour. But I was very grateful for the opportunity because it was a toehold in my career in technology. But I've always been on the finance side, and I'm also a CPA. But never really a traditional CPA. I've been a tech guy, I've been a finance guy, and I'm really enjoying where I am these days. And yeah, to Tom's point, we work together. Tom and I have worked together probably a total of 10 years, and Jonah, some subset of that time as well. And it's very interesting to catch up with you guys to hear. I've been away from that backup, DR, recovery, data protection, cloud storage space. I've been away from that space for 2.5 years now, and I'd love to hear what's going on and how things have changed and what you guys are up to.
I think we're going to talk a little bit about cloud versus on-prem, but something I want to share with our background was when we met, I was very much an operations guy. That's kind of my first role. And talking with you really helped me take a little bit. I had a business degree, of course, so not a traditional IT guy, if you will, just kind of a guy that needed a degree that they didn't really have an IT degree, and it worked well. And I took some accounting, probably too much that I really don't want to go into because it was all my extras I had to fill, electives I had to fill in with accounting classes. Only thing worked on my schedule. So not really good at it, but never really thought it had a place. And then working with you, really watching you zero into every dollar and cents out there. A lot of our listeners are Veeam-centric companies. A good chunk are service providers or work with partners. And something that you helped me understand was we were never really a Veeam company. It seemed like we were a storage company. It was always about what did it cost us. And as I interface in with companies today, and this is why I wanted to bring you on, they're often struggling with their cost structure. They're looking at their competition and saying, well, this is what they cost, but we want to be boutique and cost and charge more because we can do these things. But at the end of the day, when you start asking them what things cost, you'll be shocked that most of our partners cannot answer that question, Will.
Oh man, that is such a good point. Yeah. I mean, and don't get me started on it because, you're going to need 3 podcasts, to cover it because, to answer the question, how much did that cost? It's just never as plain and simple, especially when you're dealing with something that is deployed over a period of time, whether that's multiple months or multiple years or anything like that. How do you measure that cost? Is it a variable cost? Is it cost of goods sold or is it overhead? How you categorize all those things and which ones are important, right? I mean, I have conversations where it goes like this. That's not important. Oh, yes, it is. No, that's not important. Or that's really important. Well, why? Right? There is there's a whole lot of opportunity in cost, and that's why I like the subject of cost so much, because if you understand how that cost behaves relative to both your profits and the value of the business, you can create some magic, and it's wonderful for understanding it in the pricing conversation. If a large opportunity comes for a customer, especially in a situation where it's so large that the prospective customer has big bargaining power, right? They're gonna say, okay, yeah, I know what you want to sell this for, but here's what we want to buy it for. And so then the question of, well, what does it cost to deliver it, and can we deliver it properly and profitably at the price that this guy wants to pay for it? And the most powerful thing you can do is if you can come back and go, yeah, we can do that. Oh, should I send over the contract? Right. And weirdly, I become part of the sales motion, even though I'm the CFO. Right. That is the most fun for me when I can help a business grow by understanding the numbers that well.
I'm going to translate a little bit into the Veeam world, right? Back in one of my first marketing classes, I remember that we basically took, I don't remember the exact terms, but it was the concept of if I have a unique product, I can sell my unique product and say why it's unique and somebody will want it. It'd be very attractional, right? A niche marketing. I want to sell like Starlink. I'm on Starlink a lot. There's not really another Starlink. You live in the country, outskirts, you travel, you RV. There's not really alternatives. You just want that product because you need it. It fits it. But when we start looking at things like salt, I remember it was like Morton salt versus this salt versus this salt. You can't really differentiate your products so much. I think in the Veeam ecosystems now, we all see Veeam as the product. We all have our spin off of it, especially on the cloud side, I'll say. It is the same. So what is your marketing pitch? It's I do it better than some other guy. You might say I have a portal. Well, it's expected everybody has a portal. Well, I back it up securely. Well, these are all known entities. So now you're just going, why service it better? Well, that doesn't change your price because I think you're right. When the customer's on the other side and saying, okay, I don't care what you charge. This is what I'm willing to pay. If I don't know my cost, how am I there? I always have to remember these people or remind them and say, you're basically out there doing the same pitch these other guys are. You have your human side, your connection, your networking, but at the end of the day, they believe all things are true about the service presented from all their vendors. So knowing those pricing, and that's where these deals die on the table, Will. Like, they just don't know. And they're like, this is $1,000. The customer's like 800. And they're like, okay, well, did they just say yes when they should have said no because it's going to cripple them? And I think that's what our listeners are really, or should be paying attention to right now as they listen to you, is the value of that.
Yeah, one of my favorite cost stories, and again, you're gonna have to tell me to stop here at some point. But one of my favorite cost stories is about the idea of absorption costing. Um, and absorption costing is the concept that if you go buy a car, well, it took materials and labor to make that car. So the labor is a part of the cost that they look at when you go to the dealership, and the guy says, well, I can't sell below this because that's my cost. Let's abstract that a little bit. Let's pretend that you're buying a Tesla, and there is no middleman. You're buying the car from the manufacturer. And he's probably going to say, I've got a price here, and here's my cost, and I've got to have some margin, but my cost is my cost, and I can't sell below that. Well, I don't know how Tesla does it. I would imagine that they've thought this through on a deeper level than maybe General Motors or Ford, because they seem to be progressive about these kinds of ideas. But this idea of absorbing labor costs into the finished good, it came from Henry Ford, and so Ford, had, but the giant difference between Ford's production and manufacturing back in the 1920s, whenever this happened, was that if on a Wednesday afternoon he didn't need to make cars on Thursday because demand was slack, he sent his entire labor force home, and they didn't get paid for Thursday or Friday or until they got called back. Well, today, the same group of guys shows up every Friday, whether they've been making cars or not. Okay, the balance of power has shifted a little bit more toward labor. And so labor is actually really behaving like a fixed cost. I mean, granted, you can have layoffs and you can close a plant and you can downsize and so forth. But as long as, within normal timeframes, months or a quarter or even a few years, the amount of dollars that you write checks or in payroll as a car manufacturer really only changes very gradually as you add another plant or whatever, right? So to consider that labor is actually really a part of that car might not be valid. Maybe what you should only be looking at is the cost of the materials when you decide whether or not I can run a special and I can sell below my cost, so to speak. And traditional accounting, that's a terrible idea. You're losing money. But if you've got an inventory that needs to move, and you can get cash from that inventory, you're actually better off doing that transaction below the traditional cost because those labor cost dollars are gone. Now it will show up in your public company audited, generally accepted accounting principles financial statements as lower gross profit or even negative gross profit if you sell it below the cost of materials plus labor. But the business is better off, and your actual real earnings are better when you do it. We could run the numbers, and it's a very interesting exercise, and it totally holds true in some slightly different ways in IT and cloud, that it's just as important to understand the behavior of your costs. And that's just one scenario. The common scenario that we have in cloud and IT is if I'm standing up infrastructure, what is the price that I need to rent out that infrastructure essentially to my customer? What is the price that I need, and how much can I pay for the infrastructure I'm buying.
No, and I love that we're talking about manufacturing, because I'm going to throw it over to the newly graduated college guy here in a moment, because I'm going to tee it up a little bit. But you and I actually talked about work in progress at one point, and you started telling me all this automotive stuff. And I was like, that's so interesting, because I was an ITIL guy, and where did it all come out of? British Automotive Manufacturing, right? So it ties in. So I don't know if it's because we're dudes and we like talking about cars and stuff or what, but like it just translates into all. So I'm tying it over to the new college grad here, because one, I know he took a class in ITIL at some point, so he should have some comments. But Jonah, you're also a cloud service provider. So, I mean, don't give away the inside stuff here, but maybe hypothetically how you deal with some of these things, because I'm sure what Will's talking about resonates with you on your side.
Yeah, I mean, it does. And I very much like to be a fly on the wall for these conversations and retain what I can, because especially, since our global data vault days, I'm not writing code necessarily or onboarding customers in our support desk anymore. I'm on the pre-sales team as the primary sales engineer. I'm on the product team as the product architect and product engineering manager. So, kind of as Will spoke to, as we're having conversations with customers, there's always conversations around, well, what sort of discount can we afford to offer? And as we're looking to refresh infrastructure or go to reselling and white labeling services in the public cloud, or going more into the SaaS offering, it's okay, what's our cost of goods for that? What sort of markup should we put on that? How do we maximize profitability while falling in appropriately with the market in terms of features and pricing? And how can we maximize margins while still aligning with that market price?
No, that's true.
It's kind of there's two battles to be fought. One is negotiate the best deal you can negotiate. Obviously, selling for a higher price is always going to be better. It's than selling at a lower price. But the real question comes when the choice is selling at a lower price versus not selling.
Yeah, and I find myself having conversations in that regard, where sometimes with the sales, I find a lot of salespeople that I've worked with tend to focus more on the closing the revenue and bringing in the revenue, and there has to be conversations on what it's really costing us. While we might be getting that that increased revenue on paper, kind of like you were speaking to about lower or negative gross margins, what is that costing us in our infrastructure to maintain, or even going back to the labor cost? Maybe this is a very high demand, low revenue customer that takes a lot of work to onboard, that takes a lot of work to support overall, that, maybe we're only getting $200 a month for that customer. Maybe if we instead had chased down, $1,000 a month customer, it would have been a similar amount of labor on our part for much more profit.
Yeah. Our founder, investor, Anthony, when I worked with him on these kinds of issues, he was always, the one who was easily agreeable to ideas about, it's always powerful to be able to say yes, to look at our costs in ways that some people may not think about to consider. But I would get pushback sometimes from sales, where there'd be a situation where customer wants to pay, X minus 5, and sales is going, yeah, we're just not making enough money at that level. And I'm like, it's fine. Go ahead, win the deal. If it is still profitable, and the only ever pushback we'd get from Anthony was, don't sell too many small deals, right? Because we always underestimate the effort required for each and every customer, especially when you get to hundreds or even thousands of customers, right? All of a sudden you've got, just this ongoing burden in every little way, whether it's support, whether it's invoicing, whether it's collections, whether it's just general customer service. At some point, those things become big factors. And it takes the same effort, generally speaking, to do many of those things for a tiny customer as it does for a large customer.
Yeah, well, and we touched on like the labor cost and the effort level, but another aspect I tend to bring up with it too is, in a perfect world, you'd have unlimited labor resources and this would not exist. But let's be real, it's not a perfect world. We all have constraints. I might be having an engineer pour 20 hours a week into that customer because they're very high you have to hold their hand a lot to get them through that onboarding and then to support them long term. That's 20 hours a week that same person could be spending on other higher dollar customers we already have, reducing our churn.
But isn't that really also the growth of your own company? I mean, let's talk about different areas, right? Jonah, you are in this world where you can look at revenue and decide if you want it or not. Let's take like a different dev. I'll be a little transparent here. Like we're newer, we're upstarty. What Will's saying about fixed labor costs, that's a real deal. Whether my guy's working or not on a customer, he's still paid to be in that seat. So things we struggle with is, well, if this is our price point and somebody has a budget, can we try to maybe limit some service and meet it? A lot of times what we find more often than not is not a limit of a service, but a scope creep, right? You're so good at backing up our stuff. Could you just administer our Office 365? And we've said yes before. We're IT guys. If we were a huge company, we'd be like, no way. We need to be pointed ninjas at what we do, standardization for training and ops reasons. Right now, we're like, well, if it can keep the lights on, if it avoids a capital expense, if it does whatever, we can keep going. So I think it's also where your company is, because the listeners are all over the map. We have the big guys. We've got these little guys coming in. And I think this is a good transition into on-prem versus cloud. So I'll kind of preface a little bit in Veeam terms, and then we'll move to general orgs, right? I get asked this question all the time consulting with cloud providers, because I do that behind the scenes, and they're always asking me, well, you were with Global Data Vault and now, you're out there and the business. What would your advice be? And my answer is, and maybe Will would say the same thing, I'm like, that's not the business to be in. It's too late. You're not going to compete with the big boys. You're not going to keep up with the capital expenses. So if you're going to do this, it is now time to take advantage of those Veeam cloud service providers that do aggregation or Veeam Data Cloud, and have a sales team and support team and not be the infrastructure team. Spin it that way. And this comes down to that question of cost. They're like, but that costs me more money. And I'm like, well, except you don't have all those hidden costs that Will was referencing. So those shadow IT costs hurt us so bad. As an ops guy, I built my life around time tracking and looking and seeing what does it really cost us to onboard a certain customer, but it comes down to my company. So let's pivot into a little bit of the cloud world and whatnot in here. So are we on-prem? Are we moving to the cloud? We know data protection exists, but I think let's talk religion. I've always loved on-prem. Cloud is just somebody else's computer, as they say, and with less access. So in our respective areas, like where are we seeing things? Like let's go over to Jonah first. Jonah, where are you? Do you see it in cloud or on-prem? And I know you're a cloud service provider, so I'll help you. We're not talking about backing up to the cloud, but we're kind of talking compute resources. So
Both. So what we're seeing and what we've seen a lot of other Veeam service providers do is, when you were talking about, telling the startups, hey, it's too late to be a service provider, you can't compete on cost or scale. Now that, Veeam and other backup products in general are increasingly supporting things like S3 compatible storage, we're even finding the same as one of the largest Veeam providers. And, with our half dozen other backup products, we cannot compete with the Amazons and the Wasabis and the Backblaze and the whoever else's of the world. In some cases, we think it's for maybe like 95% of our customers, an immutable offsite backup with maybe some additional services and support built on top of it is enough for our customers. So we're evaluating where we used to only really use those sorts of things for maybe long-term retention and archival of backups. And we're starting to maybe reevaluate and see where we can bring that into our portfolio as a lower cost offering. Wherein if you just want that cookie cutter level of service, we'll resell, white label where we can, provide some additional services and support for those massive products and solutions that we will never be able to compete with at scale. And then if you need something more specialized, more customized beyond that, then we're still bringing you into our data centers in most cases because it's more economical for us to run things like virtual machines and storage in our data centers, we found, outside of backup storage.
So Jonah,
Is to go to an AWS or an Azure in most cases.
let me ask you this. When I think about the evolution of IT infrastructure and what we talked about a few minutes before we started our recording was what comes around goes around in the IT world, so to speak. We seem to be headed toward even larger scale infrastructure in a lot of ways, particularly as it relates to AI. But just a preface question, so to speak. What happened to the concept of edge?
Edge, it's ironic that you asked me that because we actually sell Veeam appliances that we decided to name Edge Cloud last year. I mean, it's a little interesting. I mean, if you look up what edge computing is, it technically meets the definition of it from the perspective of you have our central cloud and then we're using it as almost like a local cloud and vault at the customer site. For the three of us having been at GDB, it's kind of the same take as what we used to call the local data vaults for StorageCraft and Veeam when we sold those once upon a time.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's not really what you consider most people, I think, to consider traditionally be edge computing. I think most people think about it like, you're leasing some bandwidth and some caching from someone like Cloudflare. So you're providing like local website resources, not necessarily like, hey, I'm running something in my office. But we've seen so many companies shift to the cloud that at this point, like local offices or data centers have almost become that edge computing.
Right. And edge does not seem to be a particularly common. It seems like there's been I suppose if you could look at Google Trends over the past 5 years, edge was a much bigger deal 3 or 4 years ago than it is today. You even had data center operators working to build low latency small data centers in secondary markets, and or even like we saw here in Dallas, some guys were building small data centers inside big buildings to provide that low latency. And that idea seems to have fizzled a little bit, maybe not completely, but at least a little bit. And so the thing that I'm wondering about as I think about what's happening with AI, what I think so many people believe is kind of the next step in AI is custom agents, right? We're gonna write AI agents for our businesses that'll be custom and unique, and they'll probably in most cases be very, very proprietary and a whole lot of secret sauce. We could all think about how in the backup and disaster recovery world, how much secret sauce we accumulated in terms of the all the mechanics of doing a recovery when a ransomware event it springs to life, and we have this urgent recovery for a client, and not just in that moment, but just in the day-to-day moment of supporting the customer and so forth. I mean, I could see tremendous opportunity for a business like yours to scale using AI because you could train the techs that need to be involved in both the day-to-day administration and then the urgent recovery situations. You can train those guys with the AI tools. And if the AI tools are trained on what all the guys that in the organization have learned already and have been doing for a while, you've got this great proprietary AI agent. Would you put that up in hyperscale?
It's funny that you get into this because one or two of the employees on my team have actually been working on exactly this the last several months for us.
Viewers, we did not plan this.
No. Yeah, so they have actually, they've been tinkering in their home labs. They've got some spare GPUs they've been putting into servers, and they've been starting to build and fine tune and train their own local large language models, trained specifically on things like internal knowledge bases, Veeam knowledge bases, public Veeam user guides, other public resources like the Veeam Community Hub, in order to try and give a well-refined agent that can not only help our internal support text, but also maybe act as almost like a tier 1 support chatbot to our customers. And the idea with it was we wanted it to all be locally hosted so that we could control the data. We could control the access and not have it, talking to an open AI or something where we couldn't necessarily guarantee the sovereignty of the data, or we didn't necessarily want to pay exorbitant fees for API tokens or transactions or whatever they're called.
Yeah, you probably want those agents to look at your customers' data. And so that absolutely has to be proprietary and secret, right?
Yeah. Well, and you're right. That's some of it too. How can we take some of our data and start using AI and some custom trained algorithms and models to identify trends? Like, hey, we see kind of like Veeam has done for years with Veeam 1. They've got the ransomware alarms where they will look at things like suspicious CPU usage or data size changes and alert you to potential compromise in your environment. But more on the services side of it, almost how can we maybe take some of that data and ingest it and identify indicators of churn where we might need to go and proactively reach out to a customer because maybe we think we're at risk of losing them because it looks like their data might be moving elsewhere, or maybe we see a forecast for massive data growth with them. So we can proactively reach out to negotiate, a 12-month commitment on a higher storage commit so that they can receive discounts on that storage consumption.
God, that would have been so cool back in the day, right?
Yeah.
And so does this lead to something along the lines of edge compute for AI agents?
Maybe. I will say too, bringing it outside of the Veeam, so I'm going to equally pigeonhole it as much. You see a lot of it too, honestly, in the smart home and the home lab communities too. People spinning up their own Facebook models, running them in their garages, and even in some cases, some of those systems are getting to the point where people are building their own custom voice assistants to replace, the Googles and the Amazon Echoes of the world.
Wow. Yeah, somebody on this call may have done that, and you might have been talking about it. So
This isn't really Jonah that we're talking to.
Well, you know what? I'm not the only one. I will say, I host some of my own GitHub repositories for some of it, but none of that is stuff I came up with. I'm just going out there. I'm taking 2 or 3 publicly accessible packages from NVIDIA and open source projects and making them all talk to each other with some help from Python and ChatGPT.
Yeah, wow, easy. Sure, we'll all do that right now. Right after the call, we'll just write our own home.
But before our 3:00 call.
Yeah. What's scary though is we're all talking about this, and I go back to the James Cameron and the Terminator kind of Skynet thing. And what was really scary was, and a lot of people didn't really watch it, but it is one of my favorites, is Terminator 3. And the whole concept was how Skynet came up was there were viruses infiltrating Department of Defense systems that they couldn't get to stop. So they unleashed this AI system to stop it and stop the threats. And so they inject in the AI and it traverses all the networks. And within moments, you're in like whatever crisis room that's all red and flashing. And all of a sudden it all silences and they're cheering. And all of a sudden in the background, they start seeing launches happen from all the nuclear weapons. And it was now humans were the existential threat. Jonah and I talk a little bit about this to carry through is they discovered a couple weeks ago, I think we said that AI were given prompts to basically simulate deletion and termination and to prevent it. And it self-replicated itself to avoid
and lied to the user or it at least attempted to escape its sandbox and replicate itself to preserve itself.
All right.
I think this was back when they were doing the initial tests for ChatGPT 4 Omni back in December. There's some white papers out on it. They basically go through all these simulations of if we removed the guardrails, what would it be capable of to help ensure safety when they release it to the public.
So we've gone from Henry Ford to the Terminator apocalypse.
There you go. That's how a podcast works, my friend. That's the podcast. This is why we release on a Friday, because people are like, oh, Veeam stuff, a little bit beyond Veeam, and they're either avoiding work or driving to work, and they get something, or they hopefully aren't watching it while they drive because their hats are available. But yeah, so edge computing. Will, you talk to me a little bit about like asset tracking in hospitals and stuff. I think somebody you were working with, if I'm not mistaken. So let's get a little geeky tech and kind of pivot a little bit into that. Tell us short about that.
So what I learned with my client TrueSpot, who'll be winning an M&A award for an investment that they took here in North Texas here shortly, is that they started in the automotive market, and Mike Hanna went to go buy a car. He'd already picked out the car on a previous visit, and I'm paraphrasing the story. I don't have all the details exactly right, but went back to go write the check, and they couldn't find it. And out of frustration, and he was a radio engineer, business guy with a background from both Nokia and Ericsson, and he thought, geez, I could solve this problem. So they've partnered with Reynolds and Reynolds in the automotive space to pursue tracking of cars on lots as well as keys on lots, and that's a cool growing business. And now the second major vertical for them is healthcare. And what I had no idea was that a thing like an IV pump cost $10,000. And of course, that's just what I've been told. I haven't seen the invoices, but and the reality is, obviously, a hospital can't buy an unlimited amount of those kinds of assets, and particularly the ones that are smaller, like IV pumps. Well, nurses will hoard them. They'll put them in a desk drawer because they're scared they're going to run out and not have one when they need it, or they're small enough that they'll get rolled up with the laundry and maybe even go out with trash, or they'll walk out of the hospital with a patient in a completely legitimate situation, but never come back. There's a huge opportunity to control costs and track assets. We need a machine that does this kind of treatment, and we need it now. Where the heck is it? Right. So using radio technology is a cool approach to this problem. I think most people would think, well, you're going to want to use the GPS technology for this. The problem with GPS technology is you have to talk to satellite. The satellite knows exactly where it is in two dimensions, longitude, latitude, so to speak, or X and Y, but it has no idea where it is in the vertical dimension, or as they call it, Z, right? Because it's 18,000 miles away, and you just can't get that level of precision. With a radio technology, you can say it's on the third floor, or it's on the fifth floor, or it's on the second floor, like immediately. And so these guys have built both the radio network, or the receivers and the transmitters, and they've got patents on that. This very clever intellectual property, and they've done an amazing job with the software backend, processing the data and presenting it in a nice, clean user interface. And they've got one for healthcare, they've got one for automotive, and company's cool and growing. It's a very interesting business, and it does present the same sort of accounting and finance problems, such as what really is our cost? How does the cloud cost play? What is our cost for the physical infrastructure that has to go on premises at a hospital or a car dealership, and so forth. And grow it rapidly. So there's always the constant demand for capital. As you can't scale a business like that without capital, because there's physical assets involved. It's been really fun and very interesting to work with them.
No, it sounds absolutely wickedly cool. My wife works for a subsidiary of Toyota, and their project was focused on or featured on the Today Show, and they did the same sort of thing with radar inside of a vehicle. I believe. And so what it did is it stemmed out of the project of, a child left in the back seat, if you will. And what they were able to do was not just use camera technology, but this system would actually say how many people were in the car. And as I listened to them talk, it was things like they could tell if somebody was having medical issues. They were having problems if like an Uber driver, was in distress, or a passenger in the back, and they could alert authorities. And it did so much more. But one of the fun things I remember is they played the old like clown car game, like how many many people can we stuff in the car and seat? And they'd get like 16 or 20 people, and it would say it's this many women, this many men, this many age group, and it could identify this all.
That's crazy.
Objects too, like, hey, you left your golf clubs in the
Yeah, and so they took that technology and they're spinning it into a wired city in Japan, as I believe it. And I don't know what they're doing with it, but it's kind of one of those premises of, remember, you used to have the "I fall and can't get up" button. Well, imagine now if you had something and they'd be like on the third floor, whatever, we think somebody went down, and all this technology is so cool like that. But you're right, it's not GPS based because of Z. So I got really excited when you talked about keys. I'm like, I'm trying to air tag my keys because I swear to God, now that we're not putting them in things, I never know where they are. For my own life as a personal user, I'd love to have a system like that in my house where I could just tag my crap and be like, where's my wallet? Like, there's so many applications.
Yeah. I think that one is going to be important for the next few years. And I think about my grandson, and I'll bet you he never knows what a car key was.
Yeah. Right? That's crazy.
Uh-huh. No, give me the keys, Dad. It will be like, it won't be that way. Somehow Dad's going to give him permission through some other mechanism, but it ain't going to be, give me the keys, Dad.
Yeah, the way you're rolling the windows down.
Yeah, what would be great is imagine grounding your kid. Like back then, they'd have a secret key or something else other way. Now it'd be like, nope, denied all day long. No, that's wicked.
We're going to restrict you to going to the grocery store.
Right? That'd be amazing.
Car would die if you leave the
Air mile often.
Often.
Pull over.
Geofence your teenage drivers.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I know already people do that with different apps. This would be a whole new level of complexity. I'm going to give a couple shout outs here because we're coming towards the end. So just a couple things is, first of all, and I don't know, Jonah, did you get Object First news today as well? Or am I speaking just?
I did.
Okay, good. So
I've actually got a little more news than you have, actually.
All right, so I'll start with mine, and then you can jump in there because it's kind of both of us. So Jonah and I are part of an influencing program called Object First Aces. It's kind of like the Veeam Vanguard program, but it's for Object First Veeam storage, and we're with a really great, talented group of people over there. Nico Stein, he's been on the podcast, Chris Childerhouse, and of course, I want to give a special shout out to Jeff Burke, who's their community manager. Jeff is an amazing Veeam Vanguard legend. He's also their big Kubernetes guy. And so they put out our renewal. So Jonah and I were in the inaugural class last year. So Ratmir and team and all those guys have honored us again to be a full.
Yeah, I also see Harry Curlin is over there now.
Yeah. It's a big team. So
Yeah.
Kind of how Veeam grew up channel and whatnot. It's kind of like Ratmir at the third time through doing things a little bit different. And today we were renewed in that program. So that was really exciting and is always an honor to be on the inside of Object First. Jonah, what would you have some add-on to being an ace? Did they make you like the super ace co-pilot or something?
Sort of. I'm rereading. I can't fully leak it yet. It'll be a couple weeks, but no, there's some stuff going on behind the scenes to expand the program and expand Object First's community presence. And Maurice has done a lot of work help with Jeff behind the scenes, and I've helped kind of quality control and test some of it. So we've been asked to take a little more active role in a couple of community projects than the rest of the aces, it sounds like.
Is this anything to do with, will it be coming out like in tandem with Veeam, do you think, or did they not?
I don't know. I got the email about it Tuesday, and we're potentially meeting to discuss it tomorrow. Like, I was going to leak it, and then I went back and I reread. Sorry, Jeff, the subject line of the email is literally top secret.
Well, here's the hilarious part is now I'm going to be like, well, forget giving Jeff a shout out because apparently I'm not cool enough to be in that program with you and Maurice. So I'm just we're going to audit and be a dork guy. Like, okay.
Apparently you didn't spend enough hacking and breaking down OOTB and beating it up like Maurice and I did with the virtual appliances. Because, I kept sending Jeff stuff, and I kept getting worried that someone over at Object First was going to have an aneurysm and be like, what are they doing over there with some of the weird hack and stuff I was trying to do to it?
Well, it's an honor to be a part of that program. Some of the greatest minds are over there. And that's what's been good about the Vanguard program, is just where we all reach out. The second thing I wanted to bring up is as we approach June, we're hoping to get the Texas Veeam User Group Roadshow going. So Jonah and I are your leaders for the state of Texas. We are hoping to roadshow, I think it's June 5 through 7, but we're talking about
3 to 5, I think.
3 to 5. Okay, I can't read.
Whatever that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is.
And it's going to be Austin, Houston, and Dallas. So look for some coming events out there. And I'm going to throw a shout out to our friends at Cloud IBR. They're helping organize it with Becky Cook over there. So Becky, thank you. Also, Sterling Wilson, they're one of the field CTOs for Object First. Great Veeam person, now over at Object First. Sterling's been real helping us over there along with Ryan Post to bring this about. So we're hoping that and some of our other partners like Backblaze are going to help surround it, and we'll have Veeam resources there in person as well, like we always do. Jason Buffington's going to come out and help support us with that. So we'll do a little AMA over there, but it'll be a great time to network and learn a little bit more about Veeam. We haven't really come up with some great topics yet, just because we're waiting for Veeam On. And something to keep in mind is after Veeam On, there's going to be a lot of recaps, but very special to the Rebel Devs podcast. Rick Vanover is going to be with us, and he's giving us the first exclusive post Veeam On interview. So Veeam will represent themselves on the podcast about everything. So a lot of things moving and shaking. So definitely keep watching for us out there.
Yeah, for those user group events, you guys, I hope you can reach out and get my client Fortium, who provides fractional CIO, CTO, and CISO leadership to the midsize and enterprise market. I think they'd be a huge contributor in that mid-market backup, data protection, disaster recovery, cloud storage ecosystem. Just a bunch of really bright, talented leadership team there, serving clients in virtually every industry.
Oh, we'll definitely reach out. And it's a great group. We have some small shops in there. We have those mid-size. Interestingly enough, the last Dallas one, we had 3 Fortune 100 companies in there. And I'm talking like defense, I'm talking food industry, like companies that I'm shocked showed up. But what was interesting is we did this whole Linux hardened repository versus Object First and what the pros and cons were with this whole thing. And we were talking about it, they had no idea what we were talking about. We started talking about S3 storage. And so the simplest things that we take for granted, these massive companies were just revolutionized for free, because we said, listen, coming to a Texas user group, this is what we're going to do. We're not bringing in anybody we don't believe in. It has to be products that we currently use, would support, and want to recommend. And we've worked with Fortium partners at different lives and whatnot. And absolutely, in that growth stage that you need that expertise and can't afford it, they'd be a wonderful fit into that group.
Yeah, for sure they would. And it's also cool to hear how well things are going for Object First, because you guys know that we experimented with virtually every kind of doggone storage appliance you could ever experiment with. And I think I feel like my fingers got mashed by the darn object devices that we bought over the years that didn't work, right?
Yeah, shout out to Richard Joffrion, for once upon a time starting to write us custom RAID card drivers for Dell cards, because we kept having weird issues with Ceph knocking OSDs offline when we were doing single disk RAID arrays on them.
Yeah, apparently Ratmir figured it out.
He did. Well, honestly, it's a lot of the integrations, knowledge, and support. So when you look at Object First devices, if you really tear through it, you're like, well, that makes sense. But you've said that makes sense 97 times, and it's packaged for Veeam. But the big driver this past year was Veeam put out a storage API. And this has revolutionized everything. And Object First will recommend to people. It doesn't really fit well on the cloud service provider. You're not going to hook cloud tenants into it. And maybe it's in the forecast. I don't.
Yeah, remember they were tinkering with storage APIs for a long time, and they had a few very specific APIs for certain vendors, and you could get certified and this and that. But it never seemed to be mainstream. Have they made that mainstream now?
Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah, so there's kind of 2 flavors of it now. There's the universal storage API for like the enterprise vendors of the world, like Dell for their data domains. to know those enterprise plugins a little bit better. And then there's what they're calling the Smart Object Storage API, which is kind of an additional API on top of S3 that vendors can choose to implement that gives some additional capacity and load balancing and performance benefits over just the regular S3 APIs.
It's so funny. You mentioned this earlier in our conversation that that maybe the window of opportunity for what we were doing back then has passed, and I think I really sort of agree with you. Yet I sit here and I think about, look at all these things that are possible now if we'd just had some of them. And of course, that was what we were working on. We were constantly struggling and grinding to build and make these things. And how many false starts did we have? Although we did have some pretty darn good successes too, in building these things. They're just nowhere near as easy and transportable and universal, and resilient like they are now, right?
Well, here's one for you. This is going to make you, let's take you back to CEO days at Global Data Vault. I'm CIO. I walk and go, Will, it runs on Linux now. Veeam. No more Windows licensing. How happy would your world have been?
No more SQL licensing.
No more SQL. It runs on Postgres.
Oh, I kind of like SQL, but it was the yeah, we could have the SQL in our infrastructure, but not the SQL required for the for each cloud host, right? Yeah, the
Rebel.
Boy, oh man,
So hardly expensive. We're waiting for Veeam on so they can tell us V13 when does it come out, because they've already said Linux is going to be a thing. We're like,
is this okay? So how can they be taken in? I mean, I know we got to end this podcast, but then this is a rhetorical question. But how can they be taking all that investment money from Microsoft and stabbing them in the back at the same time?
So I don't know the specific numbers on it, but if I remember right, the majority of Azure actually runs on Linux, not Microsoft.
Oh, they're stabbing themselves.
Still, it's .NET. It's still all based off of .NET. It's just newer .NET versions are cross-platform, so they're able to upgrade the code, change some calls, and make it work across multiple operating systems.
That's called not eating your own dog food.
yeah. Well, I think Microsoft has a Linux division now. Didn't they buy Red Hat or somebody like that?
No, IBM bought Red Hat.
IBM bought Red Hat. That's right. Yeah. So, yeah, I agree. It's the irony of, but I still go back to the joke of it's Microsoft Office 364, because when it goes down, it goes down. Like, and the world ends. It's funny. I've learned being an IT support that while you might think things are mission critical, you screw with someone's phone or their email, the world ends. Like, that is like the thing that has to work.
Yep. Email. Hey, this has been true for half of my career in IT, which is a very long time. Email is the killer app.
Yeah. If it's not up. And the best things we ever did was start moving things to M365 because we weren't supporting Exchange servers to keep our business moving. But we're going to move into final thoughts here. And I'll give the last one to Will. But Jonah, before you go, do you want to do any shout outs? Wrap it up, whatever. We're in the last few minutes here. What do you have?
Yeah. So, cyberfortress.com. If you need disaster recovery, if you need high performance backup as a service, secondary or tertiary locations to spin your data up into, reach out to us. We've got myself on staff. We've got multiple VMCEs, a couple people about to go for their VMCAs, very knowledgeable group with lots of expertise, not just in Veeam, but across several backup products.
There you go. And different dad, I'll pay my own bills. We are Veeam centric. We do everything Veeam related. Doesn't matter what provider you have. We audit, we monitor. We're a fractional Veeam as a service, if you will. So we have VMCEs, VMCAs, and Vanguards on staff. We can help you anything in the backup world. We're a dance partner. Do you need us to do it or help? We're here. Cloud providers, end users, whomever. No one's too big or small for us. Now let's kick it over to our special guest, Will Baccich. You're going to play us out, so to speak. So what are your closing thoughts here, or shameless plugs, if you will? Open floor.
All right, fair enough. Shameless plugs. Fortium, as an IT consulting group, really complements the space that you guys are in, because as we've always observed for all these years, the IT leadership really doesn't particularly want to never gives the attention that backup and data protection needs. It's always the redheaded stepchild in the IT world, and that's where service providers like you are so complementary, because you bring so much professional capability and results to that piece of it. Your opportunity to partner with Fortium is fantastic. I know that they need folks like you, and likewise, they have a leadership team of veteran CIOs and CTOs and CISOs that are doing great work for our clients in the mid to large enterprise space across virtually every industry. And it's been super cool to watch those guys, great growing business. And then where I am in my fractional role is as a fractional CFO, and I work with technology companies and professional services businesses, particularly SaaS businesses on the tech side. But Seton Hill is similarly a growing professional services CFO oriented fractional interim project due diligence provider with a national footprint now, and just an amazing team that I've had a super opportunity to work with. So it's really been a cool blast from the past. Even though you guys are particularly distant past, right? It hadn't been that long since we've seen you guys, and I'd love to connect when y'all are around, and let's go have a beer sometime.
Oh, thanks, man. I would love to catch up. And well, thank you all for listening. As always, catch us, like, comment, subscribe. We're going to play out with some cool music, and we'll catch you the next time.
Whether you're a seasoned solutionist or just starting out, the Rebel Devs podcast is a must listen. So join us. Comment, share, and subscribe. Be part of the Rebel Devs.